All right, hello, welcome. Welcome to our video for the Tucson Bird Alliance for 2025 about endoscoping desert purple martin nests, either in saguaros or in nesting boxes. My name is Jenny McFarland. I'm the Director of Bird Conservation for Tucson Bird Alliance.
And my name is Olia Weekly. I'm the Applied Conservation Program Manager and the lead for the nestbox portion of the project.
Yeah, so together we run different aspects of the Desert Purple Martin project. So Olia heads up the nest box part as well as is a vital part of the other part that I run of doing the actual saguaro monitoring and finding, and then in some cases endoscoping, looking inside the nests. So this is going to be an instructional sort of workshop about why we're doing this project, what's going on with these Desert Purple Martins, and the lengths we have to go to to see inside of their nests, whether it be in saguaros or on these artificial nest boxes that we have out that we're trying to work with. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So just a little bit of background about desert purple martins. They're really amazing birds. They're very cool. They're a very special bird that we have of Southeast Arizona, and they're really specific to certain habitat types. But purple martins in general are an absolutely beloved bird. So there's three different subspecies, and the eastern subspecies is pretty well known to many people within the United States. If you've lived in the East Coast or in the Midwest, you may have seen these large white gourds or like these huge birdhouses with like 40 entrance holes that people will put in their yards all over areas of good habitat for eastern purple martins. And they're totally beloved. They're really popular. People just are really into them. Even people who are not necessarily into other birds, not really birders, will are just enchanted by the eastern purple martins. They're very popular. But what many people may not know is there's two other subspecies within the United States. They are far more restricted to very specific habitat patches. They're not as widespread as the eastern martins, both of these. One of them is called the arboricola, also known as the forest purple martin, and they nest in woodpecker holes in trees. So things like aspens or ponderosa pine, they're more of a high elevation martin, kind of in the pine forest you could think of. You do get these around Flagstaff, Show Low, all the way up coast to Pacific coast through coastal Northern California, Washington, Oregon, up into Canada. So they're very much a forest martin. They're throughout sort of much of the West, but they're really isolated into pockets of good forest habitat. And then the third, least populous as well as least studied subspecies is the Hesperia, or we call them, or most people call them, the desert purple martin. And this is one right here looking out of a woodpecker hole in a saguaro. And you can see here the range. I have it in a blue circle. This is the general range of the Hesperia purple martin, so the desert purple martin. So here's a little video of mama bringing food to baby in a saguaro nest. We got this as part of our project. And this red line here is a sort of even more zoomed in look at the range of desert purple martin, the breeding range. They are very restricted to Sonoran Desert. They need large columnar cacti, and we say it that way for a reason, large columnar cacti, which includes saguaros. They need those. Those are sort of like the trees in which they nest. And woodpeckers put holes in them, and they use those cavities, the purple martins do, as a secondary cavity nester. And you can see here from my red outline circle of sort of generally the range of desert purple martins that they're not even through all of Sonoran Desert. You don't really get them nesting up in the Phoenix area or north of there. They really are restricted to not just Sonoran Desert, but sort of high quality, what we call upland Sonoran Desert, which is what we have around Tucson and Green Valley. And that's the Sonoran Desert that gets a little more rain versus the lowland Sonoran Desert, which is the category around Phoenix, which gets less rain and is just not enough rain for the desert purple martins, it seems, because this map is showing in orange where Sonoran Desert is, and the green icons are where saguaros exist. So they're not even using the whole range of saguaro Sonoran Desert habitat. They're sort of south of Phoenix area. They don't really go, the furthest north I've ever found nesting desert martins is like the Tonto area, reports up there, but they don't really go much north of the San Pedro River. So they just don't really make it up to Phoenix. So they're using the Tucson area down into Sonora. But down here in Baja, where you have Sonoran Desert, but you don't have saguaros, you do have a different cactus they can use. So this is a classic example of good Sonoran Desert habitat. This is in Sahuarita. This is south of Tucson. We got this video. And this is what the Sonoran Desert can look like with some monsoon rain. So it turns green and lush. If you get a good monsoon, which is our rainy summer months in July and August, you get just this explosion of green. And this is the greenest the desert ever looks in the Tucson, area. And there's lots of insects around. This rain creates summer like abundance of flying insects, things like damselflies, dragonflies, butterflies. These are the main prey that the desert purple martins eat for themselves as well as bring back to the nest for the babies. So this area has a lot of lush green vegetation. It's got washes in it that's producing, insect life, and it has large, tall saguaros with lots of woodpecker holes. And that's just ideal habitat for these desert purple martins. But in Baja, where you don't have saguaros, down in the sort of southern third of Baja, which is a big nesting area too for desert purple martins, you do have a different large cactus, which looks a lot like a saguaro and is actually closely related to saguaros, called a cordon. And cordons are big. They're even bigger than saguaros. They look to me like if an organ pipe and a saguaro had a baby, where they sort of split off closer to the base than the saguaros were used to. But they're very similar, and you get the same woodpeckers in Baja that you get up here. There are gilded flickers, there are Gila woodpeckers, and they make these holes in the cordons and nesting cavities that the purple martins can use for nesting, just like they do up here in southern Arizona. So it's the same subspecies, same breeding population. It's just they will utilize a different cactus in parts of Baja and Sonora where you don't have saguaros, but you have cordons. So when Oli and I started this project in 2000, it was interesting timing. We didn't know what was going to go down. Excuse me, in 2020, we didn't know it was going to go down in 2020. We had already planned to start this project, so we spent the summer of 2020 sort of isolated on our own working this out. But we really wanted to study desert purple martins since very little work's been done on them. They do nest in good numbers around Tucson, down into Sahuarita and into Green Valley, and other sort of isolated pockets of saguaro desert habitat in southeast Arizona. So we developed methods for how to use wireless endoscopes, which is a little camera device that looks like this. It's a little camera device where it has a rechargeable battery at the base. It's got a camera with its own little light source. Let me turn it on. It's got its own little light source. So then the idea is to put it into tight spaces to see what's going on. Now, we have very effectively utilized these for looking into nests. And how we do that is exactly what you're seeing in this GIF here of Olia and this photo of me, is we have these extending poles. They're like utility poles. And they collapse. We have two different sizes. They collapse down to either about a 5-foot pole or a 6-foot pole. And they extend out into either, I think it's 25 feet or about 30 feet. And we use those, we attach the scope to the tip of the pole, extend it out, and then use that to insert the little camera portion into a nesting cavity. And then that camera speaks back to your smartphone, to our smartphones, and shows us what the camera is seeing. And this took a lot of trial and error in 2020, but we did develop a good way of doing this over the next, 2 summers that works very, very well. And that's what the in-person workshop is going to be about, is how to do this effectively, how to attach it to the pole, how to deploy it, how to do this safely, both for your safety and for the safety of any nesting birds. So this is how we're able to see inside of the nests in saguaros, is using these poles. So here's a little video of what an endoscope sees. So this is a particular saguaro being followed in Saguaro National Park. I'm at the saguaro. The martins go crazy. They're mobbing. These are alarm calls they're doing. This is the first visit. There's Mama with eggs. This was July 22nd, 2020. And then after she left, I ran back again and because I wanted to make sure I had the correct number, and there were 3 eggs. Then I came back in August 6th, and there was 3 chicks that looked very much like that. And then you can't see the third one, but the 3 chicks are still in there. The third one's hard to see. He's in the back. One of his siblings is using like a pillow back there. And I did come back later, and it's like they had effectively fledged. And I wanted to play the beginning of this again because this isn't another important point that martins are colonial. They're loose. So in the eastern purple martins are sort of like you could view them as very colonial. They nest kind of right on top of each other in those gourds or in the big nest houses. But the desert ones are also somewhat, they are very colonial, not as close to each other, but they do nest in saguaros either near each other, or in some cases we found multiple nests within a very large saguaro with a lot of woodpecker holes. And when one martin gives an alarm call that something's going wrong, like something is upsetting them, such as a surveyor with a pole coming near the saguaro, they give an alarm call, and their comrades come and fly around and try to help chase off that threat. So they are uh, sort of help each other out. They're colonial, and they look to try to defend each other from a threat. So this is what this looks like. Let me just show this beginning part again. Swooping around, trying to defend the saguaro. And another important point of this for the saguaro protocol is one of the things I ask surveyors to note is how many martins come in that way when you're at the saguaro. Now, sometimes I'm able to come and go and they don't even know I was there, which case you can't really get a sense of that. But if they do alarm call and their friends show up to help support them, what's the high count of that number of martins? Because that's an important metric of how big that little colony is. Okay. So once you look inside a saguaro with the scope, you can get a good look, hopefully, at what's inside. Just like we saw in that video, the first time I looked and it was eggs. And then I came back and it was chicks. So we have an aging guide that we use that we got from Purple Martin Conservation Association. They've been very good partners to us. They're out of Pennsylvania, and they are a whole nonprofit centered around Eastern Purple Martins. That's how popular they are in the East, Purple Martins. And they have done extensive work with looking at nests and chicks. And because they're using artificial nest boxes, they can lower them and kind of look inside every single day. So they have this really good, robust information about what a chick looks like on every day of their development. So we use this guide to sort of age our own images of chicks that we get from inside saguaros. So I'm just going to go through the basic categories real quick. So these are the sort of different categories that people who are using scopes to look inside saguaros can keep track of. So we have here nest building phase, where it's just green leaves inside the nest. This is what we usually see in June into very early July. I've never found a nest beyond, say, I can look up the exact date, but like sort of the kind of the second week of July is the earliest I've ever found eggs. So, but they're in the desert starting kind of mid-May, hanging out at saguaros through all of June in this saguaro guarding period where they claim their saguaro and they keep other martins out of the cavity they want to use. And sometimes you'll look in and you'll see a few leaves inside the nest. And this is a photo of a young male martin actually collecting ocotillo leaves. We saw him doing this and bringing them into a cavity. And often you look in, if you're doing this in July, and you'll see eggs inside a nest. They're often on top of these green leaves. And this happens, the eastern martins do this as well. And there seems to be an idea of perhaps it adds moisture to the cavity, or even an insecticide quality is a theory from the eastern martins. But you often see these beautiful white eggs. They're very pointy on one end inside a cavity. Now, once you get an image of eggs, so these images are like data in our saguaro program, where you're looking inside, you get this image like, oh my gosh, okay, this is the cavity the martins are using. We ask people to keep track of that, take a photo of the saguaro and mark which cavity they're using, and then what they saw inside. So the images get reported, get sort of submitted as data. And then we also add some information about them. So it's like, okay, let's say I looked inside a cavity, I saw this image on the left. Okay, there's 4 eggs, there's green leaves. Here's the image. It all gets sort of categorized. And now they incubate 15 to 18 days. And when you're looking at eggs, you don't know exactly when they were laid. Okay. But we know how many eggs. We know a lot. We know how many eggs. We know that this is the correct cavity, but we don't know when they were laid. Once you get an image of chicks, we can now have the whole timeline. Okay, I now know based on approximately how old these chicks are, based on how they look, you can sort of then calculate back when the eggs were probably laid based on how long the average amount of incubation time. So, myself, when I'm doing this, and this is what I advise my people doing protocol to do, is once we see chicks, you can actually just sort of leave that nest alone from now on because now we sort of know the whole timeline. If it's a saguaro you're particularly attached to and you want to visit later to see the chicks a little older or see if they all made it to that older age, we can certainly do that. But sometimes I just take this as good enough and don't come back. But so chicks, this is what they look like from day 1 to 5, between 1 and 5 days after hatching. They're featherless, they have transparent skin. Then chicks day 6 to 9, so 6 to 9 days old, they start to get what they call feather sheaths. And these are like pins almost. They look like pins coming out of the skin. And what will happen is, as once they come out, those sheaths will burst. But between day 6 and 9, they look almost like they have like thick hairs almost, what they're called feather sheaths coming out. And then when they get a little older, day 10 to 14, those feathers start bursting from sheaths. So they sort of like will crack open. They're like covered in keratin, like a fingernail, and they crack open, and it's like a poof of feathers will come out of each of those sheaths. So they start to look a little more feathered between day 10 and 14. And then day 15 to 19, they're completely, all the sheaths have opened. They're pretty much feathered, but they look a bit scraggly. I don't know how else to put it, but these are real images. All these images I'm showing we've got from inside saguaros where they're feathered, but they don't look very sleek. They look a little bit scraggly. And then when they get a little older, day 20 to 26, they're fully feathered. Their feathers look smooth, more like an adult bird. Their feathers have all sort of smoothed out. They've been probably preening in the nest, and they look more like little birds, like full grown little birds. And then they fledge. So usually on day 26, they will fledge. And then you may observe them outside of the saguaro. Once they leave the nest, they often stay nearby for a few days, and the parents continue to bring them food. But they'll be sometimes, like in this photo, on top of a saguaro. I've often seen them on power lines near where if there's power lines or telephone lines near a colony area, they'll be on that. So you can see here, there's one bird sitting on the wire and then 3 little fledglings sitting on the cross beam. That's pretty common way I see them. So the saguaro project has really been developing since 2020. And by now, we're going into year 5, but as of this last season, year 4, we've had over 200 saguaros identified as nesting saguaros for purple martins. And that's huge. That's a lot. That seems like a lot. We've been mapping them out very carefully, getting a photo database of where they all are. And this is a big goal of the project, is to try to identify the locations of all these saguaros so that we can then use that information to target our invasive plant control. That's a main thing we do with it. Is buffalo grass causes fires hot enough to kill saguaro forest. So we want to prioritize these desert martin nesting areas because they are not everywhere. It's kind of crazy. I'll walk through huge patches of Sonoran desert that looks beautiful with big saguaros, no martins. And then you get to an area where there is a colony, and to me it looks the same, but clearly there's something about it the martins like, and that's where the colony is. And it will be there year after year after year. So there's particular pieces of Sonoran desert these guys really like. So we're working on making this map more and more robust and figuring out exactly where they are for conservation reasons, as well as if this ever came up with like development. This is my last. Okay. So I do want to just also quickly go over some of the information and I'm going to do a longer video for people that are helping with the saguaro portion, like doing that exclusively. But I just want to also make it clear to everyone that we do have several levels of the saguaro purple martin, desert purple martin project, where I have a whole protocol online that you can go through. But a lot of it is talking about the information we just talked about, like why they're special and important. But one of the things to keep in mind is that this takes a lot of different steps. And one of them, like 80% of it, is finding a nesting saguaro. That is so important to this project, is people reporting those saguaros. So level 1, I sort of do this in 4 levels, is how I do this protocol. And people can sort of jump on at their comfort level or sort of their time ability or what they want, or what they're interested in, what they want to do. So level one is just reporting purple martins. So if you're out hiking or birding and you see a saguaro with martins sitting on top, especially going in and out of a hole, that is like gold. The fact you found a saguaro. So reporting that is so helpful. So if you reporting sightings is level one, the fact that you have even seen martins in an area. And then if you find a nest, that is so helpful. And so reporting the location, so coordinates, or do like an iNaturalist pin, do an iNaturalist report on the free app for iNaturalist. I do have that project set up for that. I get a lot of my data that way, finding saguaros. And then just like a photo, if you can, if you're doing this, you know, looking, to do this, a photo of the saguaro is like so helpful. Like, because sometimes you get to the coordinates and there's like 10 saguaros around, you're like, well, which one is it? So if you see them going in and out of a hole, any information you can share about that saguaro is super helpful. And then level three is nesting observation. So this would be going to a saguaro that's been identified, or maybe one you found, and observing it from the ground without an endoscope. Okay, so there's actually quite a lot we can glean from this. You can get, careful photos of the saguaro, the exact nesting hole mapped out like on a photo, and just sort of information like when you see them bringing food or something. So I do have some volunteers who help in this way, where they're not really up for using a giant pole and endoscope in the desert, but they want to observe and share information, so they can just do that just with careful observation. So I have some information about that. Things like how many martins come in the mob, we call that like mobbing behavior. So how many come in response to an alarm call? That's very important information. So I have a whole thing on this, but that is a really helpful thing too. And then of course, our last level is doing scoping. So we only allow people to help with using pole and endoscope, and we have this equipment we can like loan volunteers. The only people who are supposed to be doing this are people who have done our training. And the reason we have this restriction is because we're doing this in partnership with Arizona Game and Fish, where they give us a permit every year. And to do this activity of putting a camera into looking, peeking into a saguaro cavity. And what we've worked out with them is people who do our training, they're sort of trusting us to assess who's capable of doing this. And then those people will actually be listed on our permit. So unless you've done our training or done a one-on-one with us or something where we then submit your information to Arizona Game and Fish to be added to our permit, those are the only people who are authorized to do this activity. Because there is, we want to make sure we're not stressing the birds out too much or hurting any chicks or anything. So that is an important thing. Is the endoscopes and poles are for staff and volunteers who have attended our training, such as this video and then our in-person session later. So and the main idea is to what we talked about is to look to go to a saguaro either you found or has been sort of assigned to you because someone else has found it and submitted that information to me. And then you go inside, you go up to the saguaro, you do the scoping, which we'll learn all about in person at the in-person workshop. I also have a separate video we're going to send you where I film myself in the desert doing this, showing how you strap the scope to the pole and everything. Those sorts of tips. We have a separate video we're going to send. It's about 10 minutes long. And you get data of photos basically. So with your smartphone connected to the endoscope, you get your information of on what date and time you got these images. So these are different ones I got in 2020 of like a mama with eggs, little pink chicks, pretty full, pretty close to ready to go chicks. And then this baby looks like he's going to leave later today. That's how ready he looks. So just getting your data for photos, and I have a whole thing about how to use your endoscope. But the endoscope is a piece of equipment that does work very well, and I showed you one here. And the brand we use is Depstech, okay, or Depstech. I don't know, Depstech maybe. But we get these online, and they're very good. They're very good technology, and they are wireless, although they have quite a long wire. But they are wireless. And another important factor with them is they are rechargeable. So you do want to use sort of a micro USB cord to charge them before every session. And they can be kind of power hungry. And so I do recommend, and I have this in the protocol, I do recommend that people bring like a battery backup, a rechargeable battery backup like you would use for your phone for the endoscope. And you want to turn it off between saguaros if you're doing multiple saguaros because they can just burn through battery. A really important thing to know before we do our workshop in person is to pre-download this app. Okay, it's called DepStech View. It has this blue icon of like a camera lens in a blue square. It's a totally free app. You just download it. And then when we're in the field, what you're going to do is you have to use your phone and you're going to connect wirelessly. And it's interesting because it doesn't work the way you might think it would work. It doesn't use Bluetooth. It uses Wi-Fi. So it uses the Wi-Fi settings where you go to the Wi-Fi settings on your smartphone and you look at when the endoscope is on, you turn the DepStech endoscope on, and then you look for a Wi-Fi option to pop up called DepStech. Okay, and you're going to click on that, and then you're going to give it a password, a Wi-Fi password, which is super secret. It's 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Okay, on all the scopes, it's the same. Now, if you're using a different scope than you used last time, you may have to go through this step again, even though it's the same password and everything. You're going to you're going to open your phone, go to the settings, go to Wi-Fi like you would to connect to any Wi-Fi, look for DepStech something. Every now and then they're called Jetian. I don't think any of ours are the original ones said Jetian. They're older ones. The newer ones, though, all that was what we'd be giving you. They all say DepStech something with some numbers after it. And that's kind of, I think, particular to that device. But anyway, they all have the same password of 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. If you're in an area where there is other Wi-Fi signals that you may have connected to before, such as the Mason Center where we'll be doing our practice, it may ask you sometimes when you're on weak Wi-Fi and your phone asks, do you want to stay on this Wi-Fi or allow switching? Tell it to stay on that Wi-Fi because it's not actually Wi-Fi. It's just somehow that's how the connection is made so that when you open then the DepStech app, you see the image like a video, like a live image of what the camera is seeing. And within that app, then you can take video, you can take photos. So this is their examples like an engine or something, but it has these app options where you can start recording video and it records them right to your phone. It's really cool technology. And here's some information about charging and stuff. But that's the basic idea is you have to make sure you already have this app loaded onto your phone. I mean, we can do it there but we really want to take advantage of the early morning lack of heat to get sort of out in the field. So already have this app on your phone would really sort of streamline everything. And then just know we're going to be using Wi-Fi to connect to the device that you're practicing with. It's very cool. We have a separate video that we're going to send along here. And this is one where I went out and did a whole demonstration on how to actually attach it to a pole, which is what we're going to practice in person. But it's a good idea to watch this ahead of time, sort of so you know what you're getting into too, that you're using this pole right near a saguaro and that you're then, using it to look inside a hole. And then I just want to just briefly show the fact that this is our live map that we've been working on with a lot of people's help. A lot of people have submitted saguaros to us, or we've gleaned them off of eBird or iNaturalist, a lot of different sources. But these are all of our saguaros that we have found and have been putting on this map and keeping updated. And many of them have corresponding photos that when you click on it, it's the only way I could figure out how to do this was with links, but when you click on it and then it shows you the saguaro. So if you want to help with this project, you want to help us either go monitor saguaros just without a scope, or if you want to use a scope to go check up on these nests, these sort of previously used nesting holes or saguaros, or help us figure out which is the right nesting hole, we do have all these great resources where people can. So this is left over from last year. These are the ones that people claimed and went and checked and then got good photos of what the saguaro they were seeing. I do then add them to this larger database, especially then if people can record which actual cavity it is. So like in this one here, I have a photo where they use sort of like paint or something on their phone to then say this hole 2022 and 2021, this was the nest. This is one of my saguaros. I have checked this one every year and it has always been that same nest hole. And that's been pretty typical. We've only done 4 years of this, but that's been pretty typical of they do tend to use the same ones over and over again. So finding a saguaro is so, so helpful. Okay, so I think, and then like sharing that information with us. That's all I have on the saguaro part of it, Julia.
Thank you so much. And I should also mention, if you sign up to do the nest box portion, you're more than welcome to also do a saguaro portion too. As long as you come to the field portion where we train you on how to do it with the nest boxes and with a saguaro where you can try both and go through the different protocols, you're welcome to do both. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and I'm going to go over the Desert Martin Nest Box monitoring protocol. All right. So I'm just gonna briefly talk about the background of the project and go through the protocol. And at the end, we'll have time for questions as well. So in 2022, we launched a multinational contest to develop a nest box design that encompasses everything that we've learned from studying the natural nests of the desert purple martin, so the physical characteristics, as well as the temperature buffering abilities of a saguaro cavity, in order to develop a nest box that mimics all of those features and then using a nest box like that as a conservation tool that is a typical conservation tool for any secondary cavity nester that provides a safe place for them to nest in areas that are either lacking cavities or have experienced a huge burn and a lot of saguaro die-off, so nest boxes could bridge the gap while we're planting little saguaros. By the time they get the size that the purple martins like, we can use nest boxes in the meantime to provide a safe place to nest. While no box, we got 22 submissions, and while no box could really mimic the temperature buffering abilities of living flesh of a saguaro, we did have three designs that came the closest, and they checked off all the boxes for durability, for obviously physical characteristics, the internal volume, the entrance hole, which was provided. But we also tested the temperature buffering abilities with small temperature gauges. And these three designs came the closest to mimicking a saguaro cavity in those characteristics. We then replicated each of the nest boxes and created 25 sets, so that's 75 boxes total. We installed these boxes in or near existing purple martin nesting colonies so that they could get noticed the fastest by the purple martins. And now we're actually leaving it up to the desert martins to tell us what they like, which of the three they like, and if they like nest boxes at all, because they're not known to use nest boxes yet. They haven't been documented using nest boxes, and them using a nest box would be amazing in itself. But what we're hoping to do is to figure out one of these three designs that would be the most preferred by our purple martins. This is a project that is very similar to what we did with the Lucy's warblers. That's another species that was not known to use nest boxes until we figured out a design that they prefer. So this is very much a similar type of situation here where we're trying to see their preferences and also study them closer because if we're able to have them nest in nest boxes, then we're able to use it as a conservation tool in post-burn areas, in areas with high competition for cavities and stuff like that. So diving right into the protocol, it's important that you go out during daylight hours and during dry and calm conditions. You don't want to be scaring the parents off the nest and risk chilling the eggs or the chicks inside, so it's best to do that during the daylight hours. Obviously, it's going to be heating up here very shortly, and it's already 100 degrees outside, so early morning is probably the best time to do that. Um, Daylight hours, obviously. I mean, the purple martins get up pretty early to start hunting for prey, but just navigating the desert landscape in the dark is just not the best idea. So, um, we recommend going out just at first light or shortly thereafter. Don't use extension poles if lightning is present. We're going to be heading into the monsoon season here shortly, so you don't want to be the tallest thing out in the desert where lightning is present with an extended pole. So if the conditions are not favorable, go out a different day during that week, or if you have to skip that week, just let me know and we'll try to either have someone else go out or someone else cover, or we skip that week. But your safety is the number one priority. In terms of equipment, we will give you a telescoping pole and an endoscope camera, like Jenny mentioned, and you will use your own smartphone that to connect to the apps that you will need to navigate to the nest boxes and to visualize what's inside using the endoscope app. And I put charged on there so that you know that's the first thing, maybe the day before, that you do to prepare for your monitoring day. While you're out in the field, you will use Google Maps to navigate and find your nest boxes. Obviously, the more you go out, you might not need it as much anymore, but definitely at the beginning, you may need them. The good thing is they're white, they're tall, and you may be able to see them from a good distance. But it's obviously you don't want to be wandering around the desert looking for them. So using the Google Maps app will be the best thing to do. So you will download the app to your phone and then click the link in the protocol that will take you to the map on your app. And then you will be able to see yourself on the map and also where you are in relation to those nest boxes. You'll be able to zoom into your area and see the labels for each nest box as well. Another way you can navigate to the map is by clicking U at the bottom of the app screen at the home page. So you will click U and then scroll all the way down and click Maps, and it will show you all the maps that you've subscribed to. And this should be one that is in there. Um, this works best when you already have clicked on the link and it is saved in the memory. So that's one of the ways, but while you're in the field and you need to access it again, maybe you close the app. That is a faster way to do it than maybe navigating to your email and trying to get the app from the email. Prepare all of your equipment at a distance before you approach the nest boxes to minimize disturbance in case there are birds nesting inside. And assume that there are nesting birds inside just because we never know what may have happened between your first observation week and your next observation week. Something might be nesting even if there wasn't anything before. You want to limit your time next to the nest boxes to about a minute, 2 minutes, and then you want to walk away from the boxes to make notes. We're not providing any data sheets, so you can just make notes in a piece of paper that you brought with you or in your phone, and then you will submit those observations online. While you're scoping the nest boxes, Jenny mentioned you're able to take photos and take videos. Sometimes I like to make a video and then navigate the endoscope inside the box so that I maybe will be able to catch a good glimpse from different angles, and then I screenshot each one of those. Or you can take photos and then submit those in the online form. So, like I mentioned, the photos will help me see exactly what's going on inside, see exactly what stage the nest is in, and make sure that the nest is identified correctly. In the form, there's a reminder on how to refer to the nest boxes that you see. So as you're facing them, each box will be 1, 2, 3 from left to right. and they're always in the same order. So it's always going to be one, two, three, and we'll know which one you're referring to. But don't forget to mention which one. In the protocol document, there is an egg and nest guide that can help you identify the species that might be nesting inside. Because we have had other species other than purple martins nesting inside. Last year was the first year that was the full breeding season, and we documented other species. For example, screech owls, kestrels, cactus wrens, ash-throated, and brown-crested flycatchers nesting in these boxes. So it is very, very possible that you will see other species nesting inside, and we need to identify them, and um, you can do so by using the egg and nest guide that is provided in the protocol. And I will send all of this information, all the resources in the follow-up email, including this recording. If you're not sure, even after looking at the guide, you can always email me a picture and we can work through it together. Um, Another good way to identify a nest to species is to watch for agitated parents nearby. So bring your binoculars and see if there's an angry parent nearby that is upset about you going into the nest box. And if you're able to figure out what it is, then that's perfect. Or if you can get some field marks on the bird so we can identify the bird together. Don't worry about identifying ash-throated versus brown-crested flycatcher. They're very similar species, so it's kind of hard to identify them. But if you just tell me it's one of those species, then I'll know that it was a flycatcher. Record. So other things to record while you're scoping the nest boxes, you obviously want to make sure that you write down the species. So don't just put nest, but put flycatcher nest or kestrel nest, something like that, and put that down every time that you're submitting your observations, because sometimes you might have flycatchers using the nest boxes in June, and then in July it might be a different species using it. So make sure you also record how many eggs you see and how many nestlings and what stage the nestlings appear. And for different species, I don't need it to be precise to the day that the nestling appears. So it doesn't have to say day 10 nestling. It can just say um, completely naked nestling or fully feathered nestling, ready to fledge nestling that looks pretty much like the adults, but has a little bit of yellow in the mouth. So something that will tell me the stage of this nest. You submit as many details as you possibly can. I would prefer more than less. Like I mentioned, you will submit the data using an online form. The link is in the protocol. And please submit your observations within 1 to 2 days so that we know what's going on in real time inside of these boxes. Uh, Please fill out the form even if you don't see anything happening in there. Nothing is new since the last time you were there. This helps me see that the boxes were monitored that week and that it wasn't just skipped. Definitely submit and record and submit your volunteer hours. I will include directions on how to do that in my follow-up email, but this is extremely important. Not only is it important for us to give you credit for the time that you spent on the project, but it's really important for grant reporting and grant applications where we can leverage volunteer hours for a project, and it helps us get more funding for a project like this. So this is very, very important. And I will send you an additional resource on how to do that. And you can do it all at once at the end of the season, or you can do it after each outing. It doesn't really matter so much as long as you do record it and don't forget it. And I will send out reminders at the end as well. I want to, you know, emphasize this that your safety is the number one priority and data comes second. So please make sure that you watch out for thorny and prickly vegetation, for snakes. If you're not feeling well or something doesn't feel right, feel free to skip it. I would rather you be safe and feel good rather than us getting an extra point of data. Definitely bring a hat, water, and sunscreen. That's something super important out in the desert. If you see bees going to a box, which is possible, bees or wasps might take over a nest box. Leave the area immediately. Don't try to scope a bee-infested box, and just email me directly so that I can obviously be aware of it, but also warn other volunteers that might be monitoring the same boxes. Finally, just some general tips. Make sure to charge your endoscope before going out, obviously, but I don't recommend you charge it overnight. It might kill the battery. And we're trying to use these endoscopes for many, many years. So if you just charge it, and when the light goes out, that indicates that it's fully charged, then you can unplug it. Like Jenny said, bringing a power bank is a great way to make sure that you're not going to be stuck in the middle of the desert with an endoscope that is dead. So that is really useful. We might be able to have some provided for you guys, but if you have one that you already use for your phone, that's great. Another thing you can also do to preserve the battery life is to turn off the endoscope if you have a long hike between boxes. So when you turn it on again, you'll have to obviously hook it up and connect to the Wi-Fi and make sure that that is all connected before scoping the box, but that is a way to preserve the battery life. Definitely practice setting it up before your first outing. If you want, if you have a saguaro in the backyard that you want to scope and try out, that's great. But I would recommend practicing on an empty cavity so you're not stressing out any other birds that might be nesting. Or you can just try scoping something that's like on top of your roof or something like that. So do practice before going out, and obviously we will have an opportunity to do that this Friday when we're doing a field training session. And finally, I wanted to mention, don't fall for the decoys we have on the nest boxes. We have these little plastic purple martins on each middle box on our nest box setups. And these are used as attractants to show an active nesting colony for any passerby purple martins. So you might think we've had this happen before where people think there is a purple martin sitting very still on top of the boxes, but it is in fact a plastic purple martin. So just letting you know that they're going to be out there, but this is to be expected. And that's all I have. I'm going to stop sharing so that I could see anyone with any questions, or I can also navigate to a um, specific slide if I need to reiterate anything or show it again. I'm happy to do that. Feel free to unmute yourself or type it in the chat and we can answer questions. Okay, maybe. There's also an opportunity to reach out directly to me or Jenny via email with any questions that may come up. And obviously, you might think of something by the time we have our field training session. So bring those questions to us and we can review and even practice if you have something specific to scoping the nest boxes.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you on part two, the field session portion.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much.